Hello, thanks for joining this webinar. This is the second webinar in this BIM 360 design series, and the topic for today is staying connected and effective. Seems to be a popular webinar this session as well, and we still can see that lots of attendees jumping in. Those of you who missed out, let's say, the first webinar, we had a recorded session on the landing page, the same page you were registered on this. You all are in listen mode, meaning your microphone are automatically muted this full webinar session. And during this webinar, you can write questions in the questions area that you find in this GoToWebinar toolbox. We will probably not manage to respond in real time, but we will pick questions from this questions area you put in, and I will ask those questions to the presenter during the Q&A session in the end of this webinar. My name is Jonas Kramer, and I'm Cloud Solution Specialist at Autodesk, placed in Sweden, Stockholm. Yves, can you change slide, please?
Sure thing.
So Yves says you're going to present yourself a little bit more very soon.
Absolutely.
But you will support me a little bit in the intro here.
Sure. No problem, yeah.
I hope everyone is well and safe during this crazy COVID-19 situation that we're all suffering from in one way or in another. It is important for us Autodesk to support how you continue to do business during this situation. Therefore, we started an extended access program, the acronym EAP, meaning that we are letting all around the world use several of our cloud software free of charge during a certain time. There is still time left to utilize this program. You can find information and where to download EAP cloud software on our website in the COVID-19 Resource Center, as marked red here on the screen. For the AEC industry, we have BIM 360 Design and Docs in the EAP program. Next, please, Yves. We will start some poll questions for you in the audience so we can all see in real time who we are, etc. So can we have the first poll? So what is, thank you, Yves. What is your company's main business? Please select one. And Yves, let me know when we get some response, we can see the results.
Absolutely. They're coming in very, very fast now. So we're at 55% voted, 57. So I'm just going to keep this open for a couple of more seconds, if you will. And then we're going to have a look at the results.
Yeah, we can go for the results.
Yeah, they're at 72% voted now. So I'm going to close this one. And so here we see the results.
Oh, very interesting. It looks very similar to our last webinar. So it's most of you are engineering. Let's go for the next poll question.
Sure thing.
What is your role within your organization?
Okay, we're at 50% voted and moving up quite rapidly. So again, I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds. Yeah, we're at 70%, 72%. Let's close this down and share the results.
Also very similar to our last webinar series. Most of you are designers, but also we can see this time we have even more manager. That's nice to see. Okay, we take some polls.
Yeah.
What are you using to collaborate on design projects when working remotely? Today, I would say.
Okay, 45% voted. Interesting results. Very interesting results.
Mhm.
We'll
Looking
show them in
forward
a
to see.
second. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're at 70% voted. So again, I'm gonna close it down so that we can see the results. So interesting, quite a few on BIM 360 design already. So that's good.
Yeah, perfect. From the last webinar, it was 39%, so we had increased number here, and we can also see using VPN, we had 26 in the last one, but now we are up in 34. So that's very interesting. Okay, thank you. We take next poll.
Yeah.
Have you or somebody else in your company recently downloaded free trial licenses of BIM 360 that we call the Extended Access Program, EAP?
Just as last time, it's good that you've put a reminder in as the first slide, Jonas. You'll see the results in a second. Okay, we're at 70%, so let's move this forward. So I'm gonna close the poll and share the results. There we go.
Yeah, it's a little bit less than last time, but still some of you, around 22%, have utilized this, and that's great. And let's go for the last poll question.
Yes. There we go.
What is your level of experience with BIM 360 design?
Okay, again, we're at 70%, which is fine. All right, let's look at this last poll here.
Yeah, we have, let's say, similar as last time, but we can see we used it extensively. It's more than last time. We had 23% last time, but it's very broad answers here.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. And Yves, I will let you take over now.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jonas. So as you've just heard, Jonas was doing the intros. My name is Yves Veelaert. I'm an AC technical sales specialist at Autodesk. I've been with Autodesk for, well, 13 years now. My main focus is data management and the collaboration portfolio. So BIM 360 is part of that, obviously. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. What you'll see is that compared to last presentation, last week, it was more of a positioning and an overview. What we'll do in this session is I'm going to dive into the technical aspects of specifically BIM 360 design. We'll take maybe half an hour or so. And then I'm going to introduce Rami Architects, Tejaperto Harju, who's going to talk a little bit about the adoption of BIM 360 design in their company. And then we're going to wrap up with a Q&A. So just as an agenda, I'm going to do a bit of a review on what we've discussed last week. As I noticed during the poll, there's quite a few people who aren't familiar with BIM 360. So we're going to do a quick overview, maybe 5 minutes or so. And then I'm actually going to dive into some of the technical aspects of BIM 360. We're going to do a demo. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to introduce Rami Architects, and at the end, Q&A. Okay, so first as a review, so BIM 360 design is very much based on the Revit work sharing concept, as I mentioned, again, as I mentioned last week on the session. So it essentially means that that whole concept of having local users and local models and connecting to a central model hasn't changed actually. And I think that's one of the greatest benefits of BIM 360 design. which essentially is the fact that all of those users, they're up and running in a matter of minutes, if you will. I tend to say if you were to move your central file, your central model into the cloud, because that's really what BIM 360 is all about, connected BIM, if you will, BIM with the power of the cloud. So we're just pushing this central model into the cloud. If we were to do this in the background and push those central models into the cloud and not tell anyone, and just make sure that the local model is connected to the cloud, nobody would actually see the difference. They would still be using save to central, reload latest, relinquishing objects, claiming objects, etc., etc. So from a day-to-day designer's and engineer's point of view, nothing changes really. The only difference is we're not connecting to a local central model or Revit server, we're connecting to the cloud, which has all kinds of benefits in its own right. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, one thing is that we're obviously going to use that work sharing concept, as I mentioned. But what we really wanted to do is take it to the next level, which essentially means how are we going to make sure that not only can we connect different users within one company, but how do we set up for success, if you will, between different design disciplines and between different teams? So architectural team and structural team, or maybe architect, structural, and MEP, maybe landscaping and architectural, etc., etc. So it's really this question as to how do we move this forward? Work sharing is one aspect, but how do we move this forward into connecting different teams together, if you will? And that's really what this session is all about. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept of BIM 360, so as I mentioned, BIM 360 is our portfolio, and I do specify portfolio. It's not just a product, it's a whole portfolio of communication, I would say. BIM 360 is a cloud-based portfolio. It's what we call connected BIM, BIM with the power of the cloud, as I mentioned before. And so essentially it means that we're gonna have a communication process between different users, between different disciplines, between different companies through a cloud-based storage platform, if you will. And that storage platform is called BIM 360 Docs. I tend to say, and by no means is it doing it any justice, but think of it basically as sort of Windows Explorer in the cloud. It's so much more than just a Windows Explorer, and we'll get to look at some of those benefits today. But just as a start of coming to terms with what this is all about, it is a sharing location in the cloud with a couple of with a lot of extra benefits attached to it. BIM 360 Docs is the platform. And then depending on the niche and the discipline that you're working for, we have 3 more modules on top of that. And I do specify on top of it. So it's all integrated. Nothing is separate from the rest. So if you're looking at designing, if you're looking at Revit, for instance, or if you're looking at Civil 3D or Plant 3D, we do have connections to that storage location in the cloud, and that's what we call specifically BIM 360 design. So just to make sure everyone is on the same page, we're going to be looking at Revit today, but there are 2 other modules, if you will, that take part into BIM 360 design, which is the Civil 3D interface. So for those of you who know Civil 3D and data shortcuts and what have you, that's an integral part of BIM 360 design. And also Plant 3D with its database is connected through BIM 360 design into BIM 360 Docs. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But as I mentioned, there are actually for other disciplines, other modules. So we're not going to dive into this today, but there's BIM 360 Coordinate and BIM 360 Build. So when it comes to pre-construction and understanding whether an aggregated model is suitable to actually being built, so clash detection in the cloud, that's really where BIM 360 Coordinate comes in. And then anything that has to do with health and safety and inspections, if you will, and checklists and commissioning machinery, for instance, on a construction site, that's really where BIM 360 Build comes in. Okay. So as I said, we're going to be focusing on BIM 360 design today. So when we talk about BIM 360 design, we really have to look into the details. And again, specifically today, we're going to be focusing on the Revit component. So it essentially means that from a Revit BIM 360 design point of view, actually, we're talking about 3 bits and pieces, if you will, which make up BIM 360 design. One is the interface inside of Revit itself. And that is nothing new, actually. That's been in Revit for, I don't know, 10 years or so. So save to central, reload latest, as I mentioned earlier on. It's actually the same buttons. The only thing we do is we push information from Revit, from the worksets, into a central model, which this time sits in the cloud. And when I say it sits in the cloud, it essentially means that we're pushing data into that base module, if you will, which is BIM 360 Docs. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, we wanted to take this a step further and make sure that we can communicate between different disciplines. And that's really where this third module comes in place, which is design collaboration. And as you'll see, so this one is a Revit module, if you will. The two others are cloud-based. And again, you'll see that happening in live action in a second. But this is really where we want to make sure that we have an official and auditable handover process between different disciplines. Essentially, we want to get rid of those discussions where somebody says, well, I never received your file, or this is the file I was working on, and then it turns out it's not the latest version. So that sort of handover process, we want to have that fully automated, and that's really where this design collaboration module comes in. Okay, so a couple of more concepts, and then we're actually going to dive in, as I mentioned. So saving versus publishing. So what you have to understand is that if you look at BIM 360, then there's a couple of aspects here. So as you've seen, there's a couple of modules. So we do have the users in Revit. There is a central file, but we also have BIM 360 as a location where we have visible files for the wider community. Because one of the things, as I said, it's not doing it justice. It is sort of a Windows Explorer in the cloud. Well, one of the aspects where it differs from that concept is it has what we call the large model viewer integrated in it, which essentially means that we can view files without having the actual original editing software or authoring tool, if you will. So it means that we can view Revit files. It means that we can view DWG, DXF, but also other file formats such as DGN, IFC, SketchUp files, etc., etc. And that's the quite critical part here is, as I mentioned, you don't need anything local on your machine. No design review, no DWG TrueView or anything, or even Revit in demo mode or whatever. No, you can just use that viewer and understand those files. Actually, the next step forward is then to make markups on those files, send them back to the original designer. So again, this is all about communication and optimizing collaboration between different teams. Now, it also means that we have to make sure that what we send out there for others to view is something that as a Revit user, for instance, we have committed to. And that's why we have this concept between saving and publishing. So for a Revit user connecting to a central file and saving to central and what have you, we're looking at this first level and this second level. So essentially what that means is that if I create my model, so I'm starting up with a template, I'm activating worksets, and I'm creating the central file in the cloud. Well, the first time we do this, we're actually going to create something which is visible right inside of BIM 360 Docs. And why do I say that? Well, because afterwards, all those users in Revit, they're going to hit this Save to Central button and reload latest and what have you, sync with Central. Actually, what happens is they're going to create or they're going to update the central file in the cloud, which is not the visible file inside of BIM 360 Docs. So this is specifically for the Revit users, and they'll specifically connect to the central file, but that is not visible to BIM 360 Docs. We explicitly have to say, look, I want to publish my version that is now the central file and make it visible, if you will, in BIM 360 Docs for others to look at. And obviously that makes perfect sense because Revit users, they'll be tweaking, they'll be going through an iterative process. Do we put the door left? Do we put the door right? What's the head height of the floor, etc., etc. So they'll be modifying, and at some point in time they'll have a milestone. That is really where the publishing comes in. Now we're not there yet. So what do we do when we want to communicate between different disciplines? Well, because this is based on BIM 360 docs, and I'm going to come back to the basics, which is sort of Windows Explorer in the cloud. Well, we can set access rights to BIM 360 docs. And so that means that I can actually have a official handover process. And remember, I mentioned this as being part of that BIM 360 design concept, which is the design module in the cloud. So what you'll see is that we're going to have this bulb, which is, for instance, the architectural team doing their iterative design, so safe to central, real latest, etc., etc. And then we're going to have a BIM coordinator specifically for the architects. He's going to be reviewing that design, and he's going to make sure that he makes something visible for the other parties, for instance, the structural team, to consume, right? We call that a package. So that architectural BIM coordinator or project leader or whatever you want to call it, he's going to review the design of his own architects, for instance, could be structural, could be MEP, could be anything really. And he's going to make sure that he's creating something called a package, and you'll see that in action in a minute. And he's going to store this, and this is going to happen actually automatically. He's going to make sure that that is visible to, for instance, the structural team. Now that structural team also has a BIM coordinator in this concept, or a project lead or whatever. So he's going to review the information he's receiving from the architects. It's not because the architect sends something that everybody has to agree to what they're sending out. So he's going to review this, and he has to accept this or consume this or refuse it. So let's say he's consuming this. Essentially, it means that from that point on, the structural team can use this design from the architects as a reference. They cannot open the file. I do want to be very specific about that. They cannot open the file and work on it. I'm talking about the architectural file here, but they can link it into their own design, do their own iterative design, and push it back as a package. Okay. So that means if we come back to my timeline here and people are working, so we're looking at this from the architectural team's point of view, for instance, so safe to central, etc. They're going to publish a file. This is going to be reviewed by their architectural coordinator or BIM coordinator or whatever, and that person is going to create a BIM 360 design package. Okay, so this is where I want to end right now, and actually let's dive into the product here. So let's go into BIM 360 design. Okay, so what you'll see here is the design module. So remember, we've got the Revit interface, we've got docs, and we've got this sort of, I'm going to call it a filter, which is the design collaboration module in the cloud. And what you'll see here immediately is a timeline. So that safe to central publishing packaging is something that is actually explicitly there in the timeline. Okay. What you'll also notice is that in this case, I'm working with two teams, the architectural team and the structural team, right? Okay, so you'll also see that there's this square here on this timeline. And one of the questions I received last time was, well, that's all fine, Revit, but what about IFC? Can we integrate IFC in some form, shape, or other into this workflow? And you can actually. So what you'll see here is that the structural engineer, maybe he's using Tekla and they're exporting to IFC. Well, what you'll see is that if I go into detail as to what that structural engineer is producing, in this case, it's one file. Could actually be multiple files. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail here, but they're actually looking at a structural.ifc file. And I'm keeping it very simple here. It isn't really a grand design or anything, but we can have a look at this. So I can actually, from a structural point of view, I can actually look at my project model, and what you'll see is that we have, as I said, a brilliant design, just two structural beams here. And so you can perfectly integrate this into the workflow of BIM 360 design. So it even goes beyond just Revit, and anything that is IFC and anything that is a Revit file can be integrated into this workflow. So how did I get here? How did I get this structural IFC file to become visible in design collaboration? So let's go back here for a second to BIM 360 docs, because as I said, it's all integrated, and what you'll see is this sort of Windows Explorer in the cloud. and this is where my file sits. Structural.ifc version 1, which was created today actually. So how do I get this file into BIM 360 Docs? Well, that's quite simple because we do have a connection even from our local desktop machine. We call it desktop connector, and that's what you'll see here. So there's an interface, which is BIM 360. You'll see that I'm moving on to my, what we call hub. So this would be your company name, for instance. This is your project. So I've called it Staying Connected, which is today's webinar. Moving into project file structural. So essentially, if I'm using Tekla or anything, I can just export, move into this location and drop my file here. You even get to see the version and everything. So the second that happens, it's becoming visible here, which essentially means it's visible in my design collaboration module in the structural interface. Okay. So this is just for me to view. Remember that this is a specific folder, and I can put security rights on it. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail here, just for you to understand that, for instance, structural, obviously the structural guys have full access to this, but maybe we've decided to not grant architects access at all to this environment, which would make perfect sense. Structural should be in charge of structural design, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up this IFC file for the architectural team. So essentially, it means that I'm going to create my package. And so packages are very specific to BIM 360 design. So I'm going to click on a package here, and I'm going to say, right, first drop or something, first milestone, whatever. And I'm going to make sure that I'm integrating my structural IFC file. Save. There we go. So what you'll see is, if I open this up, then you'll suddenly see that I've used this design. So the squares are actually files. The bulbs, they are packages. And what you'll see is that I've got this white bulb now, which essentially means that I've created a package, but I haven't shared it yet. Otherwise, it would be filled just as the square here with blue. And you can see that, right? This is just for me to say, right, do I have everything? By the way, I can add other documents. So if I have technical specifications or anything, I can also put them in this package. And once I'm happy with that, I can say, cool, let's share this. Okay, let's do that. And you'll see that now from my point of view as a structural team, this bulb gets colored. Now, the last thing I want to specify here before we take a look at what the architect is going to do is that there is a very specific difference between this first bottom timeline and everything that comes on top of it. And when I say everything that comes on top of it, in this case, it's architectural, but we're not limited to two teams. And you'll see that in a second when I move over to a full-blown project. We can have architectural, structural, MEP, landscaping, even MEP could be split up into piping, plumbing, HVAC, you name it. We can have as many teams here as we want. And so it's quite critical that you understand that this bottom one, which is, by the way, the only one that has the plus sign, which can create packages, this is essentially the company I work for. Okay, so me as a person here, I'm working for the structural team, and I'm a BIM coordinator. So that's why I have this plus button, and I can create a package. Okay, so what you'll see here on this timeline is that essentially I've used this design, the IFC file, and I've moved this forward as a package. Now, because I'm a manager, a BIM administrator in this whole project, I can actually do something which I wouldn't recommend in a day-to-day business. I'm actually part of both teams, just for you as an example, so that I can take a look at this from both perspectives. So let's swap over to the architect. So when I click this, this is going to move down, structural is going to move up. And essentially, it means that I'm now working for the architect. So I'm looking at this from the other side, and you'll notice that something is happening to this bulb here. So what you'll see is that the architect, who, by the way, you can see that immediately hasn't done anything. He hasn't put anything into the cloud. But what we can see is that this bulb is there, and it's, again, white. It essentially means that from the architectural point of view, I have received the package, but I haven't consumed it. I haven't accepted it. So again, I can click on this, I can explore this, I can review this, and once I'm happy, I can consume this. So if I do that, it means this bulb is now going to get colored. And that's really that audit trail and that consumption of information. So if somebody says, well, I haven't seen this, well, you have, because you've audited, you've consumed this file. That's the one you're using, right? So that's really what's happening here. Okay, so from a Revit point of view, what can we do here? So let's take a look at this architect now. And I've got his design open here. So first and foremost, what I could potentially do, and just to move forward here in time, I'm just briefly going to show that. Essentially, what happened with those packages? What does that mean? I've accepted a package and what have you. Well, let's take a look at my document management module. So in the background, excuse me, what is happening is that my IFC file that was in structural, the second I said, okay, let's share this, and you have to look at the timelines here and the timestamps. So I created this morning. The second I say, as a structural engineer, I'm going to share this with the rest of the teams, it essentially means I'm going to create a copy automatically in structural here. And you'll notice that it says 1028. So 3 minutes ago, that's the package I shared. And the second the architect says, okay, I want to use this, he's actually going to copy it again into the consumed folder, into the discipline that sent it to them. So you'll notice that at 10:30, so 2 minutes ago, I accepted this package, which essentially means that it's now sticking to my environment, which essentially means that potentially I could go in here and say insert, link IFC, and I could go onto my desktop connector, which you'll see here. So BIM 360, EMEA technical sales, and then staying connected, project files, architectural, consumed, and this is where you could actually take that file and link it in. That's how this whole workflow is working. And so you see there's not that big a difference between a Revit workflow or an IFC workflow, but let's have a look at how I get this file into the cloud. Okay, so well, first thing I want to do is obviously I want to create work sets. So I really started from scratch here. So, and I'm not going to specify too many work sets. I'm just going to go with the flow here. This is what we're going to be doing. Okay. And the only thing that I need to do now is say collaborate in the cloud. So collaborate in the cloud, save the model. That's fine because I activated work sets here. And the next question I'm going to get is, well, where do you want to store this? So EMEA technical sales, staying connected, project files. I'm the architect, so I'm going to push this into the architectural folder, initiate. And what you'll notice is we're going to upload this model to the cloud. So that's going to become the central file. And then we're automatically, and that's different from central files on a shared drive or Revit server. You still had to create your own local model. This is happening automatically in the background. So saving model to local cache. But apart from that, everything is very much the same. The beauty is also that if you already have central files on an M drive or Revit server, you can actually open that Revit central file, detach from central, keep the work sets, and just say, okay, save to the cloud. So you can actually move those files into the cloud, no problem whatsoever. And so what you'll notice now is that indeed, if I go into collaborate, synchronize with central, it says now BIM 360 staying connected architectural envelope.rvt. And that's really, if I go in here, then you'll notice that if I go into my architectural environment, you'll see that it now says architectural envelope.rvt. The fact that this is still working is that large model viewer. We're going to get a lightweight representation of this file so that we can use it on just about any device, because we do also have mobile apps so that you can review this file. Apart from that, this is all the same. I could go into design now, create a package, etc., etc. So swiftly moving on, because I do want to get into an interview with Thea here. Last thing I'm going to show you is how far we can take this, if you will. So let's go into a full-blown environment here. And what you'll see is that I now have, so this is a different environment. It's called BIM 360 FY21, still on my hub. So this is a different project. And I'm looking at this from the structural point of view, right? That's the company I work for. So I could actually say, okay, let's have a look at this project model here. And you'll see this is a bit more developed. So that's my structural design. Now, the cool thing is that the second you start accepting packages, and you'll see that in one blink of an eye, you can see that I actually accepted packages from architectural landscaping and MEP. So I can actually activate, actually, let's start with MEP. So I can actually combine those files and look at this, okay? I can actually put landscaping underneath. And so remember, this could be IFC, this could be a Revit file, this could be actually a standalone Revit file. I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but we can save them as cloud models as well. And I can put the architectural envelope around that. Not just that, I could actually go to the second step and say, okay, the phasing from Revit, well, let's have a look at the different phases. I've matched the phases, by the way, by linking those files and making sure that the mapping is correct. So that's what you'll see here. But also I can have a look at the different levels, floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, etc., etc. And the last thing here is that I can actually go and have a look at the content of my, in this case, structural package. And what you'll see is that, as I mentioned earlier on, we can have text specs and what have you. We can also add sheets and details and what have you to this environment, if you will. So let's have a look at, and let's zoom out a little bit. Let's have a look at one of those sheets here. So I did mention in the overview and in the short description of the webinar that we were going to talk about something called hypermodeling. Hypermodeling comes in a couple of different shapes and forms, if you will. It's a concept of integrating sheets and the 3D model, if you will. So one of the first things that I would like to show you here is that, you know, when you're searching for an address in Google Maps, you can actually get an idea of what that environment looks like by taking that little guy in at the bottom of Google Maps and dragging it in, and then you get Street View. Well, we've got something similar here. So if I hit this button and I say, okay, let's have a look at this, then it's actually gonna show me where I'm at here. I can actually have a look at my structural design. Now, the beauty is also that everything here is connected. So another aspect of hypermodeling, it essentially means if I just drop out of first person here and I select something, you'll notice at the left that something is gonna happen the second I select an object. So you'll see that it says sets package structure. I select this and it now tells me views containing the selected element. So I can actually go back to my plans and this object is still connected. So I can zoom in, have an understanding of where this is, look at the properties, etc., etc. So that's really what this is all about. All right, let's take a look at the last, and then we're going to go into the interview. Let's take a look at, for instance, and let's close this for a second. Let's take a look at the architectural design here. So what you'll see is, again, just as an overview, I'm looking at this from the architectural point of view. What you'll see is the squares are files. Actually, the publishing of the Office architectural file, this is a package, right? So what you'll see as the BIM coordinator is that we've published, and let's zoom in here, we've published right after the first, or we created a package right after the first version of the published file, right? Now, in the meantime, we have two more. So if I click on this, we're zooming in, as you can see, 32 minutes. We've got version here and a version here. So I could actually take a look at that. Now, the question really is, do I need to create another package? What actually has changed here? So the last thing I want to show you here is that from a BIM coordinator's point of view, let's go back to document management here. And so if I look at the design architectural point of view, we've got version 4 here. So that's the latest version, which hasn't turned into a package just yet. So what I want to understand is let's see what happened between that last version. And actually, I want to look at the difference with version 2. So let's compare this. So now this large model viewer is doing a comparison between those different versions, if you will. And what you'll notice is that it says there's two modifications here. There's a basic wall and a double flush door, which you'll see here. So I can actually click on that. There we go. Okay, so this is version 2. Let's have a look at version 4. So we're actually understanding what has happened between those two versions. I can go on and talk about issues. We'll keep that to the next session. So what I really want to do now is come back to the PowerPoint here, and let's introduce Rami Architects here. You'll hear from Teja in a second. Let's briefly go into who Rami Architects is. So they were established in 2000. They currently have over 30 employees. Their offices are actually, as you can see on the screen here, they're based in Finland, Tampere. It's actually a very nice older site that they're working in. It's called the Finlayson factory area. It's been built in the 19th century. Just a couple of figures here. Their sales in 2019 were 3.18 million euros. The target for 2020 is 3.68 million euros. They have a growth target of 15% every year. And what you'll see in a second is that they mainly focus on healthcare facilities, but also daycare centers and housing BIM developments. 2018 was their most, well, in 2018, I should say they were the most profitable architectural office in Finland. And as I mentioned, they specialize mainly in healthcare and hospitals, and that's what you see here on this slide. So a couple of hospital projects here. The first one actually was the Vasa Age building, which I'll talk about in a second. But they have other main healthcare projects that you can see here. What I do want to mention here is what we got from them is that they're currently working with 34 users in BIM 360 design, which is quite interesting because you'll hear from them when they started up with BIM 360 design. Specifically for this first project, the Vasa Age building, all designers are included. So structural engineering, MEP is also onto communicating with them using Revit, using BIM 360. And interesting, as they move forward, the Pori Psychiatric Institute, the development there, they've also included the client who has permissions to view the model. Okay, so just a very quick view on this first project, the Vasa Age building. This is, well, actually the H letter stands for the letter in the campus. So it's a campus of multiple buildings. This is going to be the new building, which is built on that old hospital site, but it will be the new main building. And again, interestingly enough, they've used the concept of integrated project delivery on this project. So everyone is a stakeholder in this project, down to the building owner, if you will. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to introduce Teja Peltoharju from Rami Architects here. So Teja, can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, hi, good morning.
Good morning. So I've got a couple of questions, and I think the audience is also going to be interested in how you've moved forward with BIM 360 design. So as the audience has seen on the previous slide, a lot of projects have already been moved or worked on in BIM 360 design. But let's start with the beginning. So what did your infrastructure look like before you ventured, I would say, into BIM 360 design?
Yeah, so many of our projects are done in collaboration with another architect's office, and we share the models as central files on one server, and the other one has access to it through VPN tunnel.
Okay.
And we really need to work with the same central model because our tasks are overlapping a little bit, so we can't split the model in two pieces according to our tasks. And this is like on this project, but also in many other ones.
Yeah. So that's setup that you had before, like you had like a central model, and you gave access to those other architects through a VPN tunnel. Yeah. So that sounds very much as and interestingly enough, that's what we saw in the poll as well from the audience, is that a lot of people are indeed using that same concept, central file on a shared drive and then a VPN tunnel to others. So there were a couple of steps in between, obviously from Autodesk's point of view before we came into BIM 360 design, Revit Server being one of them. So why haven't you moved forward to, for instance, Revit Server? Why did you stick with this concept, if I may ask?
Yeah, so we have Mac server, and the Revit server didn't have support for that.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think for the audience as well, what you see now with BIM 360 design is that even with Revit Server implemented, it would help in like bandwidth, but that communication process is still very limited. Revit Server was there to communicate between different Revit designers, I would say, but that whole workflow that I just showed you with understanding differences, etc., that would still not be valid on Revit Server. Okay, so coming back to you guys, so when did you start with BIM 360 design? I think you mentioned that in the overview, there's now over 30 of you guys working in BIM 360 design. So when did you start this process, if I may ask?
Yeah, so we started first with the trial in last December, and in January we continued with our own licenses and with this first project. But then in mid-March, when this COVID-19 situation began, all our employees started working from home. And at that point, all the projects where we have more than one person modeling were moved to BIM 360. And this was obviously a very big change for us, but it was actually done just in 3 days.
Wow. And how many projects are we talking about?
Well, the first projects were maybe like 5 of them, but then during 1 or 2 weeks, we got all of them that we have there now. So around 10 different projects.
And I guess what I mentioned during the presentation and during the demo that actually you could move data which already existed. So I'm assuming those 5 projects, especially maybe that Fasa H building, maybe it was already started before BIM 360 design and then moved on to BIM 360 design, or maybe one of the latter ones.
Yeah, actually all of them were old projects or already started. So
it's already started, and that's what I mentioned in the presentation as well. It's quite easy to take that central file, detach it, and just say, okay, we're going to push this into the cloud now. Everyone gets a local file, and they're good to go actually. Okay, cool. So why did you choose actually for BIM 360 design? I mean, the contacts I have with a lot of customers, they're looking into other solutions as well. I mean, there's obviously stuff like I don't know, Dropbox and what have you to upload data to the cloud. So why did you specifically were interested in BIM 360 design in this case?
Yeah, so for us, Revit was already the basis. We were modeling with Revit, and in this project, we had actually BIM 360 docs already in use. And yeah, we just saw the benefits of using this, and after the first project, we decided to move to all bigger projects after that. So yeah, based on the trial, we saw that this really works.
Yeah, and how did that adoption go? I mean, we're talking about from one point of view is the upload to the cloud, where you said, okay, 5 projects moved in 3 days, but how did the adoption go from a user's and a designer's point of view, if you will?
Yeah, I think it went really well because it took just 2 hours, I guess. So, yeah, the thing is that you just load those models there and all the links that you have. So modeling and using Revit itself, it's just the same. So you just open the model from different place. The adoption was very easy.
Yeah, and I think for the audience as well, what we do with BIM 360 design, which is indeed different from a central file on a shared drive, is that we do use delta transfer. So it is that concept of, for those of you who have been using it in the past, of Revit Server, where we do delta transfers. So not only do we expose it to a wider community, but it's also a lot faster than using the traditional way. So coming back to widening the audience, if you will, and not just the architects, but if you look at this adoption, can you just talk me through that? So, for instance, how does your customer view this transition?
Yeah, so we have given the permission to view the model for the customer in one project, as you also said earlier, and the first tests we have done has been very good. And what I really liked about it was that we didn't really need to teach the customer to use it. So we just gave the permission and said that, okay, log in here and just check out what we have done. So
cool.
yeah.
And yeah. And what about the other disciplines? I think on the slide and what you briefed me on up front was that you're also collaborating with like structural engineering and MEP disciplines.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
what's
in
going on
this,
there? Yeah.
In this first project, we have indeed all the structural and MEP designers already here, and we can view and load all the models, and links are live. So we are not using the design collaboration module and work packages yet, but that is something we will definitely do in the future, because that was just for us, like for the test. We saw that it's easier to start with this modeling and sharing all the models, and then continue after that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's quite important. I mean, if you look at it from a traditional point of view, where you just say, okay, we're going to have a central file and everyone's working in it. Well, it's based now on BIM 360 docs. So if everyone has the same access rights to that folder, you're actually good to go to indeed not use the packages, what I just showed you. And it also shows that this can be a learning path and that you can take it step by step. You start with the traditional workflow and then you expand and start using work packages, which sort of brings me to the next question. So you already alluded to that, but what are your plans for BIM 360 design? How are you gonna move this forward, if you will?
I would say that we are maybe first looking for a bigger advantage for the customer, like to give comments and do markups.
Okay.
And maybe after that, then we will move on to these work packages.
Yeah.
And like making better collaboration with other disciplines.
Yeah.
But because this is like the best way to do this is with partners who already have Revit and know the workflow of there and are used to work with Autodesk products. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's recap then. Let's do a review of the whole thing. So from your point of view, what would you say is the change to how you guys are working? So adopting BIM 360 design. So can you tell me what your results are, if you will, what you've seen by using BIM 360 design?
Yeah, so the benefit was quite huge. We have this data collected, and we checked like what was the time of the synchronization process before we got into BIM 360, and especially for the other office that used it through the VPN tunnel, they were struggling with the syncing times.
Yeah.
And also the model got corrupted quite oftenly. So then we checked these like first steps, how to make this process better.
Yeah.
Reloading the latest before synchronizing, and then informing others in this, we called it sync chat that we had. So you just inform others that, okay, I'm going to synchronize now, or reloading latest, and then you tell when the process is done, so that there's no multiple users synchronizing at the same time. That's helped a little bit, but still the model got corrupted and every now and then. And then the average synchronizing time was still quite long. And it was really annoying that you had to wait for your turn. Like, okay, I want to go to lunch. Like, when is my turn to synchronize?
Yeah.
So then with BIM 360, it's really the average, and I would say that mostly it's less than 1 minute, and it's less than 1 minute for all the users. You can synchronize at the same time. If there is really multiple users, like let's say 5 users synchronizing at the same time, then it might take that 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But usually it goes really fast, and we have never had corrupted data. It actually, to be honest, we had that once, but it was our own mistake because we had some files still linked from our own server. So we didn't load all the links to BIM 360 first when we started the testing process. But then we saw that, okay, this is something that you really need to do. You can't load anything from the server if you are working remotely from home. So
yeah, cool.
after that there was no corrupted data. And yeah, we saw that the benefit in general or in total was, can you change the slide? So yeah, we calculated that we saved about 5 work days per month in this biggest project, so the benefits of this is like 2 or 3 times the price of BIM 360.
Okay, and I think you also mentioned to me that you did like a poll internally and checked what the feedback was from the users.
Yeah, so yeah, we asked that like, are you in general satisfied in BIM 360, and do you prefer using that, or do you want to go back to traditional central models? And it was, yeah, so everybody wants to continue with this.
That's
and then also some like comments like how is it to use it. So yeah, here you can see the answer. So the most important thing for everybody was that they can actually work remotely, and that these cloud models are also a lot more reliable, and the synchronization process is a lot faster. So
excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Teija. I'm gonna come back to Jonas here because we're almost at the top of the hour. So let's see what Jonas has gathered here as questions. Maybe there's time for just 1 or 2. Jonas, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, as a lot of questions, we probably can cover just few of them because we're top of the hour. But some of you are asking where we can see the presentation or the recording. So the recording will be placed in the same page where you were registered on, and we probably will send out an email after this as well to make sure you get that information. I also want to highlight some of you asking about workflows with the version control and so on and so on. And we do remember that the next webinar we have in this series, June 25th, is around optimal collaboration workflows. So we probably will cover a lot of that.
Absolutely.
I also try to gathering, let's say, combined with different questions here, because it's a little bit confused if it's docs or design or etc. So I will give you, Yves, let's say 2 questions, and maybe you can respond them together. Okay. Yeah. So the first one is, do you plan to use BIM 360 docs along with BIM 360 design to transmit documents and PDF drawings to other design team members? So you probably can cover a little bit about how we work with docs and design. And a combination to that is we are working a lot with suppliers with several BIM package. Now we use glue and drop all files types to review in federated model. Is the design options only for IFC and Revit, or can we drop all kind of other files types in Glue and Navisworks? So I believe you're probably going to elaborate a little bit how design and docs works, and then with the other also BIM 360.
Yeah. So the basis for everything is docs. Let's be clear on that. So anything and everything you do in any of the modules, everything is stored on BIM 360 docs. Design is a module that is specifically there for Revit, Plant 3D, and Civil 3D. So it's and from a Revit point of view, we also have this design cloud module, which you've seen. This is to ease the process of communication between those different disciplines. Okay, so if you were just to say, let's say that we're gonna have multiple people working on a Revit file, then you would still need the design module because you're going to have work sets and what have you. You would be using that save to central, etc. That is part of the BIM 360 design entitlement, right? The data that it's pushed to, or the location it is pushed to, is BIM 360 docs. Okay, so what I didn't specify in the beginning is those three verticals, if you will, in that slide with docs at the bottom. It does mean that if you purchase design, docs comes with it, because there would be no point in uploading through design and then having no location to store it on. So design comes with docs, coordinate comes with docs, and build comes with docs automatically. So that is one aspect. So this is just specifically for that workflow with the packages, if you want to transmit between teams. But before that, even if you want to collaborate with different, let's say, architects through the work sets and having that model in the cloud, that's also BIM 360 design. Okay, now if you look at the very interesting question, by the way, the glue interface and what have you. Actually, glue is the classic environment of what we call these days BIM 360 coordinate. And we do have workflows these days between Navisworks and issue management. I'll talk about that in the next session, and actually having BIM 360 coordinate in the cloud. So coordinate is there to actually aggregate models, a bit what you've seen today in design, but it takes it to the next level. You're going to do clash detection and understanding where the issues are, getting those issues back to the original designers so they can modify their design based upon the clashes that you're finding. So that's really what this is all about. And when it comes to that coordination module, yeah, so very similar to the glue module. So it does support a couple of file formats. So we can actually have the Revit files in there. We can have IFC files in there, a bit like what you've seen in BIM 360 design here. But it does talk to Navisworks through the desktop connector. And obviously Navisworks can transfer all those files into something that is readable to Navisworks, for instance. Yeah, that's it.
Great, Ace. And we are, let's say, top of the hour. I just want to, let's say, summarize this and saying that when you're closing this webinar, you will get some kind of survey. Please take some few seconds to fill in that survey, how we can improve our webinars, but also please give us some topics, what you want to listen to in, let's say, next webinars. We're probably going to continue with this webinar series after the summer, but do remember we also have the last of this in this series, the 25th. I will also thank you, Rami Architect, Teja. Very, very nice presentation, and thanks a lot. And also thanks, Yves, for your contribution. And there I will end this session. Thank you, and take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.